on the one hand, it was like the conditions were not super favorable. They did not feel favorable. But also, like, in that whole era, the Zapatista uprising in 1996, the battle for Seattle in 1999, like, it kind of felt like something's happening. And there's momentum in society. And so also my older brother was like, oh, you must be a communist. So I was like, oh, maybe I am.
Yeah, Jason, you were like, oh, I'm an anarchist. And I'm like, no, you're not.
Listen, kid, you don't want that.
You don't want none of that.
Yeah. No, I think, yeah, Jason, you said something's happening. I think my memory being like a teenager, like Chris and I were both born in 81. Jason, you're 84?
Yeah.
83, 84? Yeah.
84.
So being a teenager in 94, I would have been like 13, 14 years old. When the Zapatista thing happened, I think it was just out of high school when the battle in Seattle. So when you said like something was happening, I think what I remember from that particular time was that something else was happening that was in distinction to the Soviet Union, which I don't think I really had a very good, I still don't. It's something that I'm still learning about, analysis or understanding of why it collapsed, what it was, what they were trying to accomplish as a society.
I have no idea what the Soviet Union was.
Right. But I had known that it had collapsed. I'd known that it had failed. I'm old enough that I can remember my social studies class talking about the Kremlin hardliners, the communist hardliners, trying to launch or trying to hold on to the state, and Yeltsin driving down in a tank and all that stuff. I have conscious memory of this. But I understood it as something that didn't work out. And so these other things that were happening in the world, and I did have friends that went to Seattle, and I think when Chris, you mentioned an aesthetic appeal, I remember these guys coming back. Actually, one of them was a woman coming back, and they had like, oh yeah, man, this is where the rubber bullet got me, and showing me their, these wounds I had on St. Crispin's Day.
Yeah, I remember being like bummed that I wasn't able to be a part of that.
And I felt that same kind of, like, I suppose what now would be termed FOMO, where I fear of missing out. I felt like I'd missed out on something important. Yeah. I think I totally understand I think a lot of people of our generations got into politics from an aesthetic point of view, from being part of a countercultural scene, of sort of adopting an opposing position, no matter what that was. I think that's why cultural anarchism was such a big deal for people in our generation, or like that, that waning Generation X, the early millennial crowd.
Yeah.
As a young person, I think
like a lot of the neo-Nazi phenomenon was a lot more like there was a real neo-Nazi phenomenon back then.
Like not just Proud Boys or whatever, but like actual Nazi skinheads that like beat up immigrants and they killed that was back when I forget his name, the kid in Lubbock was killed by or it wasn't Montana was killed by neo-Nazis. I don't remember.
I don't remember either.
Yeah,
it's also like
what wasn't his name Matthew?
Matthew Shepard is.
Yeah,
but he was killed in Montana, I think.
Matthew Shepard was killed in Lubbock or Amarillo or something,
okay,
yeah.
And then there was another kid who was killed in Montana, and then there was that other kid that was dragged to death behind a truck in Vidor, Texas, by a bunch of
I remember that,
like Confederate hammerskins or whatever.
The Oklahoma City bombing. People read like the Turner Diaries, was like a popular countercultural book. It's very different than like getting on YouTube and listening to Nick Fuentes say, "I don't think the Jews are very good," which is that's not a defense of Nick Fuentes. I'm just saying it's a very different. It's a different moment. That's all.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because we were mentioning my trip back to Texas, and I was staying with my brother and his wife, my sister-in-law. And of course, they've been together since about this time that we're talking about. We lived in this small town called Tomball outside of Houston.
Yes.
And right. And I had just gone back and visited, and all the ways in which things had changed. There's like a freeway driving through my childhood memories now. And I was talking to my sister-in-law about it. She said, "Oh yeah, Tomball, it's nice. There's a farmer's market out there every Saturday or something like that." And I was like, farmer's market? Like in my day, it was Klan rallies, which was true. Like when I was a kid growing up there, that's where the Klan got together. So yeah, there was this sort of thing existed. And I suppose if I said I had an abstract notion of the Soviet Union as a failure, I certainly had a notion of I don't think I would have understood it as an extreme right necessarily at the time, because again, I was a teenager. But I did know that that was a threat, and I saw it and recognized it as a threat. So
I remember, and I think we might have talked about this before. I remember being in my Christian fifth grade school. We had a weekly like gazette that our curriculum publisher put out, and we would get that on Fridays. And part of our schooling on Fridays was we would sit down and we would read this newspaper and discuss the stories in it. And I remember discussing the Gorbachev coup and then stuff like that as the Soviet Union was collapsing and the opening of the Berlin Wall, things like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, I think that's the other thing, just because you mentioned religion when I was younger, because I went to Christian private schools.
Yeah.
And I think there I was sort of exposed to Jesuit Catholicism and its orientation toward, let's say, like social engineering. That maybe I'm putting that in. Maybe a Jesuit wouldn't agree with that term, but I would. But about sort of like going out and doing good works in the world, and
no, I think a Jesuit would agree with that. I think it's a very conscious thing on their part.
Of social engineering, it could be.
Yes,
sure, yeah. And that appealed to me as a young person. Also, I always thought that was why anarchism never did appeal to me, is because I had somewhere in my coding was rather this idea about organized activity, I suppose, perspectives, canon, even. It's like these are the texts, read them. Actually, and that's the other thing I remember about this time. By the time I graduated, I didn't go right into college. I decided I was going to get a job, be like a working man or something. But I went and got a job at Books A Million in Asheville, North Carolina, because my family had moved this time. And I remember this is the first time I picked up Das Kapital on my lunch break. And I was like, I'm going to read this book, which was, like a disaster. Like 30 minutes, with a sandwich and a coffee in one hand, like, okay. but I tried, and that was the other, I think, all of these things sort of going on, and these things sort of colliding and intersecting in my life. That's probably why, by the time I got to college anyway, I thought of myself as a socialist. So,
yeah.
But actually, the one thing I'll say about that, about thinking about yourself as something, and I think this is one of the problems that the kids today, or the young people who are being turned on to these sorts of politics, and we had also, was that the United States, and this is a quote from one of my favorite TV shows, doesn't make socialists. I don't think there's actually really a way you can be a socialist in the United States, because there's no structure, there's no organization, there's no party that you can join, there's no youth wing, blah, 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 So a lot of us are sort of like individuals in our own minds. We have these principles and these ideas, but really don't have a way of practically applying them in our lives or in our world. And I'm willing to say for the three of us that's where the ISO came in, and sort of, and not sort of, but allowed us a kind of outlet for our perspectives and into doing something practical. It was a lot of reading and a lot of like branch committee meetings, like how many times we have to read the same book over and over again. But it was also anti-death penalty campaigns, anti-war campaigns, and the immigrants' rights rallies in the aughts that were a big deal. And so again,
it's not like we were doing something, and sometimes we were,
right. But we were there, and it was happening, and I think it was giving us a kind of outlet or some feeling of traction along the gears and the engine of history, that we were actively and positively participating in something.
I think that's right. I mean, like that's why when I was I think it might have been like 13 or 14, and I was saying, I'm an anarchist because I think this and this, and then that's when Chris was like, I think you're actually a communist, because as far as I was concerned, there's no real difference. It's just what it is that I think about things. That's what makes me what I am. And even like when I joined the Young Communist League, it was all very. It was an abstraction. It was like I was basically, because I had signed up on something and sent some mail. I got some stuff in the mail. I was like, okay, now I'm a communist. It's like, but it's not. Functionally, it wasn't really until I went to an anti-war march in Austin, Texas, and went to a rally in support of the bus drivers when they went on strike.
Yeah, I remember this.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, you know what? Being a socialist, having this community organized in this way, being connected to this broader community of working people, this is what it means to be a socialist. And so I think you're right. I think you're hitting on something actually really important there. That these are the things which allow you, that make you into being a socialist. Because on our podcast we've talked a lot about like the social effects and thus the political consequences of the neoliberal restructuring of the world economy. And one of them, I'd never heard it put quite so succinctly, is the United States doesn't make socialists, like in the way that you just said. It's like, oh, that's right, that's actually what it is. And I think that's especially true since 9/11, when everything whatever felt like a window that was starting to pass through in like 99, 2000 with like Nader, you know? That all closed like overnight.
I think that just the concept of for Americans in general, and this isn't a new thing really. I think this is since the probably wholesale neoliberalization of our society from top to bottom, right? Not just the economy, but the way that we understand ourselves in relation to each other, right? The fracturing and atomization, which I would say has been a project since the 1970s, but has really accelerated in the 90s and come to complete fruition in the aughts and the 2010s, right? But like understanding ourselves as whatever we are is the same as like the way that you can decide that you're like born again Christian, right? I accept Jesus into my heart. I'm a born again Christian,
right? Yeah.
And then from that point forward, that's what you are from then on. Doesn't matter what you do, what you say. Otherwise, you don't actually have to go anywhere to be a born again Christian. You don't have to interact with the body of other believers. You don't have to do anything at all. You just are, and that's sort of the way that Americans approach identity.
I think it's exactly how Americans approach identity.
I don't think it's
when we say like liberalism with a capital L, that's what we're talking about, or that's what I'm talking about. I mean, like it's not like whether or not you are nice to your neighbors, even though they're from Puerto Rico, or if you have a gay friend. That's not what it means. It means this bootstraps mentality about everything, and this individual, like, I have made this decision. This is what matters to me. My identity is such. And so I've decided that's all that there is. And so it makes sense that it would be the way that we do things in general in the United States, in this extremely Protestant at its foundation society.
I would say it's like more so than just Protestant, but Calvinist, because you still have like the communal belonging and sort of sacramental understanding of the world in like Lutheranism and Episcopalianism and stuff like that. But that
that's
incredibly sort of Calvinist understanding of your individual relationship to the divine and to the world around you as a unit with you, the one person, maybe your family, actually. Maybe your family, your nuclear family of, you know, your wife and 3 kids or whatever, and dog, as being part of like the extent of your engagement to society, right? Engagement with society.
I think that's well said. Yeah.
Which doesn't exist, right? Society. That's what I hear. Dude, what a just like dog shit way to look at the world, right?
Seriously,
it's very isn't it depressing.
It is, and yet it's permeates everything, like including, like we just said, even our understanding of how to be a socialist, how to be an anarchist, a communist, an anti-capitalist. It's like, oh, I'm a Maoist now. Like, what does that mean? You just because you've decided that, oh, this feels right, so now that's what I am. Moving when I moved to a bigger city and found myself in relation with a broader community, and having a weekly a day of obligation and a a great charge to a great commission to go and do things, certain things which had to be done. That's what allowed me to not just to no longer be an anarchist, or whatever. It's also what allowed me to escape the malaise of the post 9/11 moment, because I think that was probably true for, I don't know, all three of us, probably millions of people, because it was the invasion of Iraq was like somehow it hit harder than the invasion of Afghanistan. And
right, because there was no direct link to what happened to 9/11 and the invasion of Afghanistan, and everybody knew it, but sort of just pretended like there was, so that like we can continue doing badass America things to people that were different than us,
Yeah, that was a moment that really did call for, like, it really urged. I will say I felt the urge to do more than just disagree. So the way I did it was I met up with other people who wanted to do the same thing. And I kind of feel like that really characterized a whole long period, because like from there's the Day Without an Immigrant demonstrations in like 05 and 06. Like basically everything from then on seems to be a refining of this mass collective approach to addressing the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only thing I'd really add on to that was just to go back to this idea about who you are, who we are in the world, and the way people identify with things in their head. I think there's one really significant exception to this, which is your job and your work, because of course this is how I'm going to think about things in terms of what people do for jobs. But if you ask an American, for example, what do you do? There's always an understanding. There's no misunderstanding, I should say, that you're talking about someone's work, what they do for a living.
Right.
And I think that's woven into people's identities in ways in which they're completely, partially to an extent, I think they're aware of, and then I think to a greater extent that they're completely unaware of, that this defines them so much that this is how they put themselves forward into the world, and they expect other people to understand that putting forwardness or something like that, because they're also in the same position where what they do in the world and how they make a living is bound up and also in their own identities. And I think to try to move this forward to the other end of the conversation is what that meant personally for me was that, okay, if like we had our ideas, we had the organization that we were a part of and the events happening in the world, but that had to be what we did.
Right.
Like that had to be the job. And even in there, toward the end of my time in the United States, it was the job. I was a union organizer. That's what I did. That's how I made a living. And I remember going into union organizing and coming home to my partner at the time, and she was asking me how my day was, and it was the weirdest thing. It was just myself all day, like I didn't have this. All work is alienated and so on, but I didn't have this sort of sense of like, okay, well, I'm making burgers for somebody, or I'm cleaning a sink, or I'm running a register or something. But I felt like I was just being myself, doing the things that I do normally, even when I don't get paid.
Right.
And so, yeah. And
so
so
that was us in the ISO, was just doing stuff doing what you were doing as a job.
Right. Yeah. And at some point, and again, I'm making this probably a little bit too personal, but I'll coin it in terms of like a graduation. Once I sort of like hit that moment in my head, that everything that I did, even when my job was doing something else, became about doing this thing that I was. So if I had a job somewhere else that didn't have a union, for example, I'd fail, but I tried to organize a union everywhere I worked, and sometimes did really well, or did a lot of things that I'm proud of. And I was thinking just the other day when I worked at the food co-op in Austin, and I organized a walkout against the war. It was like Wheatsville Workers Against the War or something like that, and I brought 20 of my...
Didn't you get shit canned from that job for trying to organize a union?
No, I didn't get shit canned from that job. No.
I think
somebody else did.
So
yeah,
you left, and then a bunch of people got shit canned for
that
the
might
union
be
that
more
you tried
like
to organize
happened.
later. Yeah, I think that's what happened.
That might make sense. I know. No,
Yeah.
There was some things like that we tried to organize a union there. The one guy got a hold of like the company emails and started sharing them with everybody, but then he wasn't very clean about it, and he got caught. That guy got fired.
Yeah.
But anyways, but my point of all of that is to say, when to try to talk about the gap, the void of the past 20 some odd years, whether it was organizing those coworkers when I was in my 20s, just out of college, to go to an anti-war demonstration, or organizing unions in places like Whole Foods or McDonald's with Fight for 15, taking a stand with immigrants, organizing with college students against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the occupation of Palestine. That when I look into that void, which I do, which happens and is there, and I feel very, very lonely, and I think to myself, my God, what did I do? Where did my life go, in a sense? Maybe I don't want to put it in quite such extreme existential terms, but I look back on those things like, no, this is what I did, and this is what I'm proud of. And this, honestly, like having participated in these things, the Kenneth Foster campaign, for example, where we worked to get someone sentenced, commuted from death row, and succeeded. That one time, among all those other people who were either still on death row or have died there, I have those memories and those thoughts that make life today in my 40s sustainable.